Morning, everyone. Sure got a lot of snow last night. Yeah, it covered us up right up. Tons of snow. Lots. Probably about 10 inches or so.
Now, the weather. All of the Northeast should have some sunshine today, though there may be a little bit of snow at first for some communities. Should be windy for some areas, with highs between minus 15 and minus 7 degrees today. Tomorrow, warmer but cloudy or mainly cloudy with the chance of flurries for most of the region. Some areas will have periods of snow at first. For Sault Ste. Marie and parts of the Superior East region, flurries in the amount of 2 to 4 centimeters. Moosonee should have some clearing in the afternoon, and for Fort Amity, some clearing in the morning. Attawapiskat will have a mix of sun and cloud.
Good morning, I'm Matt Galloway, and you're listening to The Current. Spent 23 years in prison before he was exonerated. Now the federal government has introduced new legislation with his name on it to change the way Canada reviews possible wrongful convictions. Coming up, we'll hear from the Justice Minister about what that will mean for people serving time and for victims. That's in just under 30 minutes. But first, a plan to clean up tens of thousands of Alberta's abandoned oil wells.
Slippery.
I've been following the case of abandonments and suspended wells and the long-term liability of sites going back to the 50s and 60s and 70s that have not been in active service, that are still not cleaned up. So that's just not tolerable to me. I think that we owe it to the landowners to make sure that those sites get cleaned up. And remember, a lot of the change in regulation came through in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so when you've got these historic sites that were cleaned up to the standard at the time, I think government bears a responsibility.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is defending a pilot project to clean up abandoned oil and gas wells. The province wants to incentivize oil companies to clean up about 170,000 inactive well sites, many of which haven't been touched in decades. This proposal is called the Liability Management Incentive Program. It would give oil and gas companies a break on royalties in return for cleanup. Not everyone, though, is convinced that this idea will work.
Nelson. I am a farmer in southern Alberta, close to Milo, Alberta. We farm canola, peas, wheat, and durum. So where we are right now is on an abandoned well site. It is probably about a 3-acre parcel. So on this site we have a bunch of equipment that has not been removed on a wellhead.
Hey, look, even
there's
the
tall
tracks
grass,
are pretty
no one's
covered.
mowing it. There's weeds here, rusted equipment, pipes laying on the ground, fence posts, wire curled up. It's a mess. So the site that we are on, it's abandoned and it's not yet orphaned. So at this point, it's in Never Never Land, and we actually have 6 other wells, actually 5 now. One has been reclaimed, that were for years and years were in Never Never Land. That there's no one wants to take responsibility, and the Orphan Well Association hasn't started.
Yeah, this road's pretty slippery. Looks like there's probably ice underneath the snow that's packed on it. Not very good for traveling, that's for sure. supposed to be sunny like this though, all day long. That's what I'll be doing later, shoveling my driveway.
Well, 170,000 wells is a large number. A lot of those wells have been sitting there for 20 to 30 years. It's been estimated that to clean up all these wells will be in the tens of billions of dollars. And industry has had a lot of time to do it and hasn't completed it in a manner that is satisfactory to landowners. So it's a big problem.
So help us understand how it would be that these wells would be abandoned. I mean, the terminology matters, right? Because Kelly talked about kind of living in never, nowhere land, because they're not orphaned, they're abandoned. What's the difference between the two?
So the wells Kelly's describing
Under
are
the
suspended.
plows.
There's still equipment above site.
Doing some
Abandoned
work.
usually means there's nothing above site. So in a lot of cases, these landowners have to farm around these facilities, often at night. Sometimes they have custom operators coming in to spread fertilizer or something like that. And it's a collision risk, it's a food safety risk, and it's a huge liability for landowners.
And the companies essentially just walked away from their obligations to clean these wells up?
In many cases, the companies went bankrupt, and they're still being in a process that goes from the Alberta Energy Regulator to transfer it to the Orphan Well Association. But there are some that companies, it's cheaper just to pay the landowner's annual rental than to spend maybe $1 million to clean the site up.
And so what do you make of what the government has proposed here to give these companies an incentive to clean up these well sites?
So our association is in favor of the polluter pay model. These companies should be cleaning up their own problems instead of relying on the taxpayer. But from a landowner perspective, in a lot of cases, we want these wells cleaned up. And we do believe that society bears part of the responsibility because they benefited from the energy development on our lands.
Let me go back to the polluter pay piece of it, though. I mean, this week we're just starting to see the financial results coming in from oil and gas companies. 2022 is the most profitable year in history in the Alberta oil patch. Record profits. Do you think it's fair that those companies that are making money hand over fist get some sort of incentive to help do what they are obligated by law to do anyway?
No, we don't. They're boosting their dividends, they're increasing their executive salaries, but it doesn't seem like they're putting money aside to clean up all these wells that are out there.
You mentioned a couple of figures. I mean, as you understand it, what's the cost of cleaning up these abandoned sites?
Some of the gas wells are probably fairly cheap, maybe $50,000 to $100,000, but a lot of the oil wells can be $1 to $2, $3 million.
And what does that include? If you're talking about cleaning it up, what does that actually mean?
So they have to make sure that the land is restored back to close productivity, but in a lot of cases they have to dig the dirt out, they have to remove the contamination, there may be pipelines that need to be cleaned up. Some of them had sunk pits, some of them are quite contaminated and are quite expensive to repair.
It's a huge process.
It is. I've seen holes 20 feet deep and 100 feet wide. So it can involve a lot of dirt, and then you have to, where do you take the dirt? It has to be cleaned at some point.
Is there a part of you that understands why these companies, given the scale of this, why these companies have been slow or reluctant to do this work?
Well, there's no mandated requirement that forces them to. And as I mentioned, in a lot of cases, it's cheaper to pay a landowner $3,000 a year for the lease into eternity instead of paying $1 million. It's just financial. So hopefully the government will change that formula to encourage them to clean these wells up in a more timely manner.
Although those payments are going down, is that not correct? That those payments have changed over time?
Yeah, it's supposed to be based on crop prices, but we are finding, ironically, that the Surface Rights Board at Alberta government is reducing some of these payments to landowners, claiming that they farm part of the land. Well, that's what reclaims it. These landowners have been farming a lot of the lease for 20 years and adding organic matter back into the soil, stirring it up, so some of the contamination can evaporate. So it seems very hypocritical that we'll give industry maybe $100,000 to clean up the mess, and we'll reduce the landowner compensation by $1,000, and he's been doing it for the last 20 years.
And again, to Kelly's point, I mean, there's things that are strewn all across her land. If you're a landowner, what's at stake for you when these sites are just set abandoned for years and years and years at a time?
Some landowners can't even get a mortgage on their land because of the contamination. The banks don't want to take on that liability. There can be weeds around these sites. They can be unsightly, and they are an obstacle that you have to farm around. I know of a case right now where someone came in to clean up a site and didn't tell the landowner his irrigation pivot come around and ran into the service rig and caused $50,000 in damage. So who's responsible for that? So it's a big obstruction and inconvenience to have these on the land, especially when there's no operator there to take care of them.
Is this something that you have personal experience with on your own land?
Yes, it is. I've had orphans on my land before.
And what has that meant for you?
In my case, it was fairly benign. The Orphan Well Association came in and cleaned it up. But I have lots of neighbors that have sites that are still there, chain link fences around battery sites, and they've just sat there. A lot of times there's gravel roads, there's power lines, and you have to farm all around that infrastructure.
It feels like the landowners are kind of, they're the ones in some ways that are abandoned here. I mean, they might be receiving some sort of payment for that site, the rental, I guess, on that area. But it's as though they have been abandoned, and this is just kind of unfolding year after year with no real sense of resolution in sight.
Have a great day, everybody. See you guys after. Lots of snow. It's higher than the soccer post. All right, everyone. Have a good day. See you later.